And this is what I've learned about mentors. A lot of companies have mentor programs, which I think is funny. I don't think you can assign someone to be a mentor. I think for me, a definition of a mentor is someone who always has time for you. And so what these people who are way more accomplished than I am, or I was at the time especially, I would call them up and they had time for me. I don't know. They saw something in me. Maybe they saw themselves in me. I don't know. And not everybody has time for us. Those people won't be your mentors. And a great mentor relationship, both parties are actually learning, because mentors you'll find learn from the experience as well. So it's not like this wise old person sitting on high dispensing advice, but rather they come with a sense of curiosity as well, which is why they always have time for you. Taking breaks.
Okay.
I believe, there's this great story of two lumberjacks, and every morning they start chopping wood at the same time, and every day they stop chopping wood at the same time. And every day, one of the lumberjacks disappears for about an hour in the middle of the day, and every day he chops more wood than the other lumberjack. This goes on for months. Then finally, the one who works all day stops and says, I have to ask you, every day we start at the same time. Every day we stop at the same time. Every day you disappear for an hour in the middle of the day. Every day I work more hours than you, and every day you chop more wood than me. Where do you go for that hour? And the other lumberjack looks up and says, I go home and sharpen my axe. And so I'm a great believer in taking breaks. I'm a great believer in turning off. And most of us don't know how to take vacation. We telecommute from a beach. That's not taking a vacation. That's bringing work with you to your family's vacation. So I'm a great believer that when you have a weekend or a week off, turn off. Obviously, there's work to do sometimes, and sometimes it's imperfect. That's okay. But where we literally have never taken a vacation, I think that's unhealthy. So even if it's just a day off, taking Friday off, I think that's a good thing. I don't take my computer with me,
okay.
And I don't like answering emails on a phone. I find it annoying. So I don't take a computer with me, so I don't even have the temptation. And I tell everybody, if there's an emergency while I'm gone, figure it out. And what you find is that it's incredibly empowering for a leader to say to their team, you got this. There are very, very, very few problems that will come up that require me and only me to input. And it's very empowering for a team to know that they're responsible while the boss is away. So I've been pretty open about this. I actually struggle to read. I have ADHD, and so paying attention to books has actually been very difficult. Everybody thinks I'm like this big reader that reads hundreds of books a year. I don't. I've written more books than I've read. But I do like learning, and so the way I learn is from listening. So conversations with people who are smarter than me, being that student, always having a student mindset. I'm insatiably curious about what makes other people tick. So insatiable curiosity in conversations, but I like documentaries as well. And so two documentaries that I would recommend, which are fantastic for sort of leadership education. One of them is Senna, Senna, which is about race car driver Ayrton Senna. Even if you're not into Formula One racing, it's still a brilliant documentary, and it's still very enjoyable. But basically, it highlights these two archetypes: Senna, who drives for passion, and Alain Prost, who drives for the numbers. And if you compare that to our modern day, who's driven by the end of year goal, the quarterly goal at any cost, versus who's the person who does it for the love. And you start to see how Senna commands tremendous love and loyalty from the other drivers who are competing against him, but they support him, where nobody likes Prost. And you start to see these two archetypes, and it asks the simple question: who do you want to be? What kind of life do you want to live? Do you want to live one of passion or one obsessed with numbers? And it puts it out there. The other one is Kumare, Kumare.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't supposed to be a leadership documentary, but it ends up being a great leadership documentary of a documentarian who sets out to sort of mock the sort of guru culture. I won't give anything away, no spoilers here, but let's just say something goes wrong.
Okay.
And it's actually quite interesting. The joy that comes from doing something for the love of it. And ultimately, Senna's still a high-performing race car driver. He still wins a lot of races. When you do something with joy, you are a high performer. And when you're only doing it for the number, you're only doing it for the result, there's some unethical behaviors that start to creep in. This is what Prost was accused of, which is running other drivers off the road because he needed the points. And so you start to sort of look at our own work, the people who are only obsessed with numbers, creates some unethical fuzziness sometimes. And so I think when you do something for joy, it's amazing how we become better performers, but also better performers, like more honest performers. I've recognized and learned that if I ask to do something that's new or unconventional, I'll get a lot of resistance, not because they don't agree, it's because they're afraid of the result. And even if I'm willing to take all the accountability, I'll give you one silly example. I published a book called Together is Better, which looks like a children's book, but it's for adults. And I did some very new and different things in that book that the publisher was very reticent to do. But I sort of went forwards anyway. And it ended up being this magical little book that no one ever thought it would be. And because they all ignored it. Funny thing is, it debuted on the New York Times bestseller list, and nobody knew because no one was paying any attention to the silly little book. But yeah, I don't mind helping clean up the mess that I make, but I definitely want to drive forwards and try new things. I love experimenting. And I also know, I think people who like to experiment, you have to recognize that things don't always go well. And when you experiment, you have to take accountability. And when you experiment, things do fail. That's the whole point of experimentation. Because if you want everything to go right, that's when you play it safe. So yeah, I'm totally fine asking for forgiveness. The opening on the first page, it says to, from. So it's literally a book that you give to people you want to inspire or to thank people for inspiring you. So, I went back to that experience I had many years ago where it was darkness that made me realize I had to make a change. And I think that's very common for people who are in dark spaces. You realize I'm at a fork in the road. I either have to affect change or I don't know how this plays out, but it's not good. And I think a lot of people have faced that fork. And again, I was very lucky. I had a friend there to hold space for me, which gave me courage. Goes back again to friendship. But if we sort of take it to something more recent, for example, I didn't write anything during COVID, and everybody was like, "Oh, did you use the time during COVID to write a book?" And the answer was no. I can't write that way. I need human interaction, and so it was a creative cemetery for me. There was no big ideas, nothing worth writing about anyway. And I don't believe in writer's block. I believe that you're in the wrong environment for creativity to happen. And so I think a lot of people, when they run out of ideas or they get stuck, they blame themselves. I don't. I blame my environment. And so that's easy to change, because it can't change me, but I can change my environment. And so, for example, this year I wasn't having any ideas, and I tried different things and it wasn't working. And so I took a risk and I moved to another country for 11 weeks. I moved to the UK for 11 weeks for no other reason than to shake things up and see what happens. And the ideas bubble. It was absolutely wonderful. So I'm a great believer in changing your routine, doing something different, putting your desk in a different way. Start inviting a friend over. I've done this one as well. A friend who is in a completely different line of business, who has nothing to do with what I do, because so many of us are working from home by ourselves. Find another friend who works from home by themselves, who might be in a completely different company. Work together and simply sit in a room together. It's amazing what happens, the ideas that flow, and just having a work buddy. Things like that. Experiment with entirely new, different ways of working. Not all of them will work, and you find the one that works for you. And when that stops working, you try something new again. It sounds silly, but I think my greatest fear is that my luck will run out. I'm happy-go-lucky, people say you make your own luck. I don't know if that's true. I've been very, my work has gone on longer than I expected it has, than I expected it would, rather. When I wrote Start With Why, I thought, okay, I'll probably get 3 years out of this, maybe 5 at the most, and then it'll be over, and it just keeps going. So I'm very grateful for that. I make a point of saying thank you to people when they least expect it. I like the telephone, picking up the phone and calling someone saying, hey, I don't think I've told you this in a while, but I'm really, really grateful for what you've given me. Some of them are good at receiving compliments and gratitude, and some of them aren't. Yeah, they deflect. But no, I'm a great believer that, send a card to someone, so just say, and I think we're all guilty of this, which is we don't call people sometimes who we miss or who we love, because you're like, oh, I want to talk to them for a sizable period of time, and I'm either too tired or the time zones don't work out, and I couldn't find an hour. And I've made that mistake. But sometimes calling someone up and saying, I only have 5 minutes, I'm running to a meeting, but I just wanted to say thank you to you. You're on my mind, and I just want to say thank you. It goes a long way. So we talked about courage, but somebody who stays true to vision, I find very impressive. I meet a lot of people who talk about vision and cause, But when they face the slightest pressure, they veer, or they face a difficulty, they change strategies. I have a lot of respect for people who are very, very cause-driven. I mean, a lot of the leaders that we celebrate, whether you like their personalities or not, your Steve Jobs and Elon Musk's, Richard Branson's, I mean, they're very fixated on where they're going, this idealized sense of the future, and they're going to stay on that. They're going to stay on that path. We can debate whether there are better ways that they could do it, or the cultures they create around them. But I have a lot of respect for people who have vision and stick to it. It takes a lot of grit. I'm a slave to my schedule like so many other people, and I open my schedule and I go, okay, that's my week. And so I literally build the balance in. I will block off an entire Friday, for example, and though I will work on Fridays, no one is allowed to schedule anything on a Friday. So I've no pre-scheduled anything on a Friday, and that allows me to have creative time, but it allows me to build in that balance. And I've been doing that for years, and it wasn't necessarily a whole Friday. Sometimes it was a few hours. So between these hours and these hours, this hour and this hour, I wouldn't schedule anything, and I was protective of it. So for example, and like we think of things like working out, we think of these things as flexible, or we put in creative time, we think of it as flexible, and somebody says, oh, can I see you at 3:00? And you look in your calendar and, 3:00 was your workout, or 3:00 was your creative time, and you go, yeah, I can do 3. And I say, oh, sorry, I have something else at 3. What, do you have any other options? I am very protective. Now, it's not ideal. Sometimes if it's very important, of course, I can make the shift. But I'm really protective of those blocks that I block out for working out or for creative time. They're not available. They don't have to know why I can't see them. I don't think anybody wants to know I can't meet with you because I'm working out, but sometimes that's what it is. I'm just really protective of those times.